Cowlazars, 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 Cowlazars. Cowlazars, Cowlazars. Come on, let's have some adventures. We'll spend days, we'll spend weeks, we'll spend months working our way through treasure hunts. Cowlazars.
All right, welcome everybody. We are very happy to have a special guest today. But before we introduce him, we wanted to show you this. Let me bring it up real quick. You think I have it right?
You did for a hot second.
Yeah, here we go.
But then when Chris Lafrida sent me that little piece of my airplane, I got the same feeling, you know, I've been full circle. And now I could feel myself subconsciously relaxing a little bit, if that makes any sense. And yeah, it was closure for me. And all of a sudden, I'm in the back of my mind, I've always been sorry that I jumped out of that airplane, because it was a good airplane. 274 times it took me out in combat mission, and they brought me back, and now I'm gonna desert this guy that's done all these things for me for 12 months. And I think by gaining that little piece of cast aluminum, I think I really don't know what I'm talking about, but I can feel that it has affected me to the point where that little piece of metal now is one of my prized possessions. I mean, that may sound crazy to you, because it is crazy.
All right, so live joining us tonight is Mr. Christopher Lafrida. How you doing, Christopher?
Good. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good. So if you guys didn't catch it, Christopher is the one who found Forrest Fenn's fighter that went down over there in Laos. Pretty awesome story, and we're going to get into it, and we're going to give everybody in the chat room an opportunity to ask questions. How you doing, K-Pro?
I'm doing great. And we're going to show the whole thing at the end. There's been different pieces and parts that we've showed to the whole story. I can tell you, I thought I asked a question not related at all to this story. And Forrest, here, I'm telling this story because I think he was so excited about it. And it's one of his most prized possessions now, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And so we're going to show the whole thing at the end, but we wanted to kind of tee up because I think he said your name like 19 times to kind of say, and so anyway,
it's excited. About 9 minutes long, and that is from the Forrest Fenn interview. We have shown different clips before, but we'll put it all together. So that'll be at the very end of the show. But thanks for coming on, Christopher. Pretty awesome. Now, when was
Thanks
this?
for having me.
How long ago was this when you actually found it?
We found it on June 15th.
Of last year?
Of 2019.
Okay.
Maybe there's a little time difference between Laos and New Jersey where I am, so it might have been the 14th or 15th, but right around then.
So we're talking like 6-8 months ago. I mean, we're not talking years ago. Last year. Okay. For some reason, I thought it was summer. Okay, cool. For some reason, I thought it was older than that.
And I think we all saw the scrapbook. So I wouldn't, I've thought about what could I possibly get Forrest. I have no way of let me see if I can locate his plane. And so can you walk us through one, are you a super secret CIA agent and you were able to get, or I don't know, what background you had, how this happened, and just kind of walk us through the story.
Right. Yeah. So I'm a little bit of a sucker for war stories, and that sort of goes back to when I was a kid. My grandfather was in World War II. He fought in the Pacific. And when I was a kid, I would always ask him to tell me about it. And he would never say anything because I was the youngest grandchild and the baby of the family. So he would never tell me. So everything I heard was from my older brothers and my uncles. And I was always kind of a little jealous about that. So whenever I hear a war story, I always kind of tune into it. And this story in particular was a little bit similar to Forrest's rescue, because during the invasion of Ishima, my grandfather was wounded. He was shot in the head, and his helmet took most of the impact, but he was spent the next month in a hospital, basically, right as he was getting out a couple weeks after Germany surrendered. And in fact, they were going to release him but he refused and he went back. I don't know what he did after that. But what's interesting is we know he was shot, and when he was shot, he basically went down, and that's the end of the story that we know. But there were guys who went in and pulled him out and saved him, and we don't know who they are or how exactly it happened. But this was 3 years before my mother was born. So without that, my kids don't exist. I don't exist. You know, it's an important moment, but yet we only know sort of half the story. And when I read My War for Me, it was similar. We knew what happened with Forrest, but we didn't know how these guys found him, exactly what they went through. So it was really interesting to me, that side of it. So I started digging and digging and digging, and it was an interesting story that got even more interesting as you sort of delved into it. One of the first things that popped up was Forrest assumes, which, you know, makes sense. He assumes that they found them because his parachute beeper, which sends out pings automatically when you eject from an airplane, that they would follow those pings back to Forrest. But they never picked it up. Where he landed, it must have been masking his beeper. So right off the bat, it was strange because the only beeper they were picking up was like 30 miles away.
Now, how are you finding all this out? Are you just like investigating, or like, is there a database of this information? Like, I'm a total layman's when it comes to this.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a few places to get sort of records on this stuff. One is on Library of Congress, I found these logs of basically most of the rescue missions, the search and rescue missions in Vietnam. And by sheer luck, I come across this. It's not something you would know to look for, and you wouldn't even know how to search for it in Library of Congress. Like, it's handwritten, so it's not pulling any keywords from the document, right? So just by sheer luck, I had pulled one up for a different month, and then I started reading it, and I said, whoa, there might be an entry for Forrest. And sure enough, I found the one for that month, and it was in there. And that's where I first found out, hey, you know, they never found his beeper. They, you know, where they picked him up was 30 miles away from where they were getting beeper pings. So when I found that, that was interesting. But then how did they find him? I still didn't know. So then I started looking at records that were in Maxwell Air Force Base. So I asked someone to pull records at Maxwell. And there were some other mission reports that basically said that some Misty pilots went out early the next day, and Misty pilots fly the same type of airplane, F-100. And they followed the last known trajectory of Forrest and then came up with sort of a search pattern, and that's how they found him. But until then, they had lost him. And then the question was, how did they lose him? Because it's a little bit bizarre that that typically doesn't happen. Like, I read through a bunch of other rescues and missions where pilots had to bail out from the airplane. Typically, their wingman is with them the whole time. But we know Forrest was, you know, they were taking out some guns and all this stuff was happening. So in the confusion, somehow he was lost. And but we never knew exactly how that happened. And eventually I got in touch with James Swisher, who was the FAC from that mission. And he's the only one that knows how this happened. Basically,
and explain what FAC is. Everybody knows.
Oh, okay. The forward air controller. He's mentioned in The Thrill of the Chase a couple times, I think. And, you know, he was the forward air controller for the mission where they were mining that main road on Chapone. And then he was, the next day, he's the guy who first who first brought up Forrest on the radio.
Oh, okay.
So he's mentioned twice. And what had happened was, in the briefing for the facts, so when Swisher was in his briefing that morning, they told him, okay, for bailouts, put the guys on a heading of 300, right? So I'm assuming, you know, maybe I don't know if they said 300 or 300, but somehow in the confusion, Forrest ended up on a heading of 030.
Instead of 0300. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's 90 degrees off.
Yeah. It's a problem.
Swisher tells me, he punched up through sort of a break in the clouds. So while he was on, taking an escape path away from the guns. So they lost him through that. So he went up through the clouds,
wow.
and they assumed he went 300, or at least Swisher did, and he went 30.
Okay.
So they're looking for him in the wrong place, and it's sort of interesting. And another interesting twist to this is his wingman did get him on radio on the first night. So for those who don't know the story, Forrest, his plane gets sort of shot up by some anti-aircraft guns, and then instead of just getting out of there, he decides to swing back around and fire incendiary rounds at the guns to mark them, so that his wingman and the other guys in his flight could take out the guns. Because if you leave them, they're so well hidden that the next mission that goes out there, they'll take out another plane, right? So he did that, which cost him, his plane is sort of stalling, and his engine's failing, and it's costing him airspeed that he could use to get to safety. He swung back around, he marked the guns, and then he sort of takes makes his exit, right?
I wonder if he got a medal for doing that, for going back when he didn't have to, right?
Exactly. So for going back, he got a Silver Star.
Nice.
That's what a Silver Star is for. And in fact, Swisher, Forrest had found, I'll get this later, but he was showing me, we were going through a scrapbook, and there was actually a letter from Swisher in there recommending him for a medal for doing that. So anyway, so he leaves the mission area, and he heads out on that course of 30, which nobody knew. But once sort of the dust settles, they try to figure out, they heard him say he's bailing out of the plane, but they don't see a parachute. They don't see the ejection. So they don't know if it was successful or not, right? And so that first night, they're sort of spread out looking for him, the other planes in his flight, and even some other planes had come later on to try to look for him. But the only person that picked him up was his wingman heard Forrest saying that he was on the ground, which was, I think he used the call sign Kingfish.
Okay.
But nobody else had heard that. And they were having a debrief. And my sense is that had his wingman not heard that message, that there wouldn't have been much of a search and rescue mission after that, because they don't just keep looking forever and ever.
Right.
No one saw a parachute. Nobody saw an ejection. But had it not been for hearing that one message, they probably, I don't know if they would have even attempted any, after that point.
And William says, in My War for Me, he mentions heading 030 and then turning 255 degrees. So maybe he was trying to get back to.
Well, the 250 is part of his. That's part of the one of his passes to attack mine the road.
Gotcha. So and I got to say thanks to Jay, who gave us a couple super chats and was saying you can also request logs from the VA. He's saying he's a prior intelligence officer, so he was just saying is another avenue you could have went, maybe was the VA if they're not classified. But I wanted to step back and say you have a personal connection because of your grandfather, as far as the whole, finding wreckage, pilot rescue, that type thing. But the first time you had heard of Forrest was from his book, The Thrill of the Chase?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I heard of Forrest and I bought the book.
Right.
The Thrill of the Chase.
You were basically a searcher that now had a new project. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people out there have been on this for a while, and I don't think you can do this treasure hunt day in and day out for forever. You know what I mean? You
got to take a break.
For me, it's like, it's a lot of fun, but when it's not fun, I do something else for a while and come back and it's fun again, right? So this sort of caught my attention, and it's one thing sort of led to another type of thing. So, it was exciting because every step of the way, I mean, something new was happening. I was finding out something new. Actually, as a sort of backstory, I had first heard of The Thrill of the Chase back in like 2013 or something like that.
Oh, okay. And that's what I was going to ask you, is how far prior?
Yeah. So, but at that time, I heard about it. I think he was giving out clues on a news program at the time. And I heard, I found, okay, it's in the Rocky Mountains. I live in New Jersey, or it might have been in New York at that time. I was like, okay, I'm not going out there. I read the poem. I looked at the map and I said, okay, I could do this for like forever and never find, I wasn't getting anywhere. So maybe about a weekend I spent on it, and I just kind of forgot about it.
So no boots on the ground. You've never actually
No
been
boots
to search.
on the ground.
Okay.
And I then in 2018, a story had come up. I quote a link to an article about it. I was like, oh wow, this thing is still going on. I was like, I kind of thought someone might have found it by now.
Right.
And that's when I found out there was a book. I was like, wait a minute, I didn't even know there was a book. So that's when I bought the book, and I was like, oh, okay, there's so much more information than just
gotcha.
poem.
So then you got the thrill of the chase.
Right, then I got the thrill of the chase.
You remember what year? You remember how far before?
Oh
last
yeah,
year?
so 2018 is when I got the thrill of the chase.
Oh,
like
okay.
March of 2018.
He had the plane part within a year. I mean, you're
Yeah,
just
what
like,
the heck? That is incredible. That's what I was trying to gauge, is how long did you spend
Right.
to try and look for this thing and then actually make the trip and all that stuff. Wow.
So
and then
2018, you got the book. You're now investigating. You found all this good information. What made you locate the exact spot? And I have been writing down all your questions when he gets to that part, guys. So just know, keep going with @KPro so I could write down questions. But so Chris, when did you get to the point of, okay, I got this? I just like us, like you know where the treasure chest is. Like you're like, I know where the plane is.
Right. So I didn't. I wasn't thinking about going for the plane at first. So what had happened was, I found all this information out and I sent it to Forrest, and he had sent me an email back, and I think you can find that on Forrest Gets Mail, one of those at Dale's site.
yeah, and your story, just so everybody's aware, is on Dale's blog. If you go in and put in Christopher's name, Christopher Lafrida, it'll come up as far as the recovery and all that. So if you guys want to see pictures, etc., you could go there.
Right. So Forrest had invited me to come visit him and see his basically all the stuff he had from Vietnam, which is a lot, and a lot of really cool stuff actually. So maybe a month later, I had an opportunity to go out there, and he had he has a logbook, a handwritten log of every mission that he flew.
Oh wow.
It's really cool. I mean, I think I spent like just an hour and a half just going through that.
Right.
It's really interesting. I mean, a piece of history, that's, to me, I really enjoyed it. But he also showed me some scrapbooks with photos from Vietnam, and he has all kinds of interesting things. He has some shrapnel that was taken out of his plane, not on a time when he was shot down, but from, like other missions where he came back fine, and then they said, oh, by the way, there was some shrapnel in your wing or something. So we went through all that, and then we were sitting down talking, and he was showing me the photo of the rescue. So he had gotten this photo, I think in 1999. What had happened was there was a group of these search and rescue folks from Vietnam who were going to the younger guys who are now doing that job, and they would do a debrief from a mission. So they would pick different rescue missions and go to these guys and give them. So these guys, I guess, might have been in the Middle East, guys who would be, doing this in the Middle East or something. So he would go in there, they would go in there and they'd do a debrief. And this time they had picked Forrest's mission, and I think Forrest was there. And I had actually written a letter to one of these guys, and they know about the treasure hunt, which is really funny.
They do. Wow, that is
They
funny.
all know about it. Yeah,
Right.
They all know about it. So, so they'd given him this photo, and you could see the photos in his the second book, Too Far to Walk. And if you look very carefully, it's hard to see, but there's like a little outline of a helicopter in the middle of a jungle, right next to a cliff, and basically that's the helicopter that's pulling him out of the jungle. So they're hoisting him out. And he was showing me that photo, and then he was saying, oh, in the 70s, a filmmaker wanted to take him back to Laos and by helicopter go looking around for the wreckage.
Okay.
But for one reason or another, that sort of fell apart. But I could see him getting just talking about it, he was getting really excited.
Right.
And that just started the idea, like, is that even still possible? It's 50 years now. I mean, what?
1968 is when he crashed,
1968,
correct?
yeah.
50 years
So
later. Wow.
50 plus, yeah. So I didn't know. I mean, planted the seed in my head, and I was like, well, let me try to figure out if this is even doable.
Did you not mention it to him at that point?
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't mention it to him because, you know,
Okay.
as excited as he got,
Yeah.
he seemed like disappointed when he got to the part where it just it never happened. But it felt like in his mind he was out there looking for it. You know,
Right.
it was something that, you know, was very excited to him at the time, I assume. So when I got back home, I started, you know, kind of digging into it. You know, I have a photo. I kind of know the coordinates. I have descriptions of the area, and then I found it on the satellite map. I found the exact spot where the helicopter was pulling him up. So I was like, okay, this is like a big piece of the puzzle to find this plane. But nobody else has seen the wreckage. Nobody saw any wreckage when, by the time they found them, it was, you know, the next day. There was no fires. There was nothing. So the only person who knew where it was in relation to where he was rescued is Forrest.
Mm-hmm.
So I started peppering him with questions, you know, what direction was your plane traveling in? You know, what do you remember of your airspeed? And, you know, those types of things. And I kept asking him. I was trying to gently do it. You know, I didn't want to tell him what I was doing because if I got to a point where it looked like this was impossible, I didn't want to build it up.
Right. And then
No
say
more than
sorry.
25 emails a day. You
You're
didn't go
right.
over that.
I bet he remembers it like it happened yesterday to him, you know?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yep. It was an absolute excellent memory. He knew he was, you know, basically he knew his plane was traveling like parallel to this mountain range, and that it hit a mountain range, not the one he was in, but the next one. And those were really big clues. And that narrowed it down a lot. But as I kept asking questions, I feel like he had enough. And he said, well, if I was back in my parachute, I could point to it. So I was like, okay, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Like, he's not, you know, he had already told me he doesn't, you know, fly past a certain area. He doesn't, you know, so he's definitely not going to go to Laos. He's definitely not getting in a helicopter, you know, hanging out the side of a helicopter looking around. So I was like, wait a minute, if we could get a drone up, that would be really interesting to use it in that way. Because, I mean, most people take silly videos with drones, you know, interesting, but I mean, they don't have I couldn't think of another use case like this where, like, hey, you know, we're actually using this to refresh 50-year-old memories to find wreckage. So it seemed like a really interesting idea. So as I kept trying to figure out if it was even feasible, turns out there's in satellite images, there's a clearing that's just close enough. So I don't know how much people out there know about drones, but you have to be in line of sight, right? And where Forrest sort of ejected, it's all jungle. And it's sort of a valley, and then it goes up to a cliff. But there happens to be a clearing overlooking that valley that would give you a vantage point to fly a drone out there. And I think it's like about a mile away. So, I mean, it's still pretty far. Still, you know, you still have to kind of a risk. But anyway, it was doable. And the first thing I did was try to find someone who could help me put this together. And I got pretty lucky. I found this guy, James Barbush, who has a pretty big following for guys who do this off-road motorcycle tours in Laos.
Okay.
And he's mapped a lot of these roads and he's seen a lot of these places. So I was like, oh, maybe, you know, let me reach out to this guy. Well, it turns out he was doing similar work for National Geographic on another search and rescue mission. So
from Vietnam? Vietnam
yeah,
wreck?
from Vietnam,
oh, okay, crash.
So he was working on with the son of the pilot.
So it totally fit, yeah.
It totally fit. So he had done he knew like all the paperwork that had to be filed. He knew like who to send out there. He even found originally I was gonna fly the drone myself, go out there flying the drone myself. So, but there were two issues. That you need 2 weeks to do this minimum because it's like a 20-hour flight out there, and then it's like 2 days of traveling to get to this remote area.
Oh wow.
So, and it was the rainy season, so you could get there and the weather would be too poor to fly a drone, right? So he says, I have a guy local who could probably handle it. Long story short, he said had found all the guys. They went out there and sort of sweet talked the village chief to give us a few guys to help us go up to the clearing and fly the drone. And he had agreed to it. And in fact, the village chief was 5 years old when this all happened, and he has like a vague recollection
68. Oh wow, that's crazy.
of somebody. Yeah, so
So you found a guy. You just found a guy.
They found a guy. Yeah,
That was already
they're in the
doing
village.
it.
They're
So-
getting it, already doing it. Like already knows all the process.
right.
That could have taken years to figure
That could
out.
have taken a long time. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I had contacted a few other people first, and I'd given up for a couple weeks and tried again. I mean, it wasn't my first try, but when I found this guy, all the other pieces fell into place. And I didn't even think about, do you need a permit to do something like that?
Right.
I don't know the laws in Laos. I mean, I had no clue, but he had already figured them
You
all
found
out.
a guy that had.
Yeah.
What kind of property would it land on? No. So when was
It's abandoned property.
Yeah, exactly. Or is it? Yeah, right. What was the first conversation where you actually told Forrest, I'm actually going to attempt to find this thing?
Yeah, have you told him by this point or no?
Was it in person, on the phone, and what was his reaction?
So I sent, we had sent one guy out just to map the roads behind the village a little bit, just to find out, can we get to this clearing? And we did all that. He came back, and then we found the drone pilot, and I had everything set up. And then I said, okay, now I'm going to tell Forrest, because we want to send him the video to look at to see if
He's got to pinpoint it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's when I told him. I said, look, here's what's happening. I didn't want to say anything until you knew it was all, knew everything was lined up, because, I also, what if these guys bailed on me at the last second? Like I would look kind of silly. So I waited till they were pretty much, the guy who was coming from Hanoi to Laos was like about to board the plane. Then I was like, okay, now we're sort of locked in, right?
And you actually made the trip, right? You went over there. It wasn't like you just had these other people do it for you. Eventually, you went over there.
Oh no, I never made it over there actually.
Oh, I thought you did. Oh, okay. So you kind of hired these other people to do it.
Right.
I got you.
So the main reason why was, like I said, it was going to take like a couple weeks to do this.
Yeah.
And if I was going to do it, we were going to wait until December.
Okay.
So because that's the dry season. But I didn't want to wait. I didn't know. I was like, hey, if we could do it now, let's just do it. And I also didn't expect them to find the airplane. When we were going out there, I thought this would be like the next step to finding the airplane. I thought, okay, now, we really intended them to go to the place where Forrest was pulled out of the jungle and try to find the items that were left behind there.
Oh, okay. And that was one of the questions in the chat was anything else found that Forrest left? Yeah.
That's what we intended to find.
Okay.
But one thing had led to another. We sent up the drone. From the video, there was really only one distant mountain top that was visible from where Forrest would have been descending in the parachute. So at that point, they asked the guides, they said, hey, can you get to this area? And they basically said, yeah, there's wreckage there.
Oh, wow.
So
and you're like, dun, dun, dun.
Yeah,
exactly.
So how did it go when you sent this drone footage to Forrest to say, does anything look familiar? I mean, how long did it take him to get back to you and say, yeah, actually it does?
Oh,
You're in the
so
right area.
Forrest was like, every step of the way was in this. So we were emails back and forth the whole time. I mean, although we weren't actually there, it was almost like we were there because we were getting photos every step of the process. And videos. So I was uploading those to YouTube and sending him like private links to all these things.
Gotcha.
And we were constantly reviewing the stuff. And they even got a shot of what it would look like descending in the parachute, like right at the exact spot.
With the drone. Yeah.
With the drone.
That's awesome.
It's really cool.
That's
so,
awesome.
And Forrest saw that and he said, that's exactly like I remember it.
Wow.
So
that's
like,
something. 50 years later.
Really, 50 years later, yeah.
Wow.
So So basically, we just kept getting lucky, essentially. So what I thought would have been just sort of the next step, again, that's why I didn't immediately try to find a way to make it there at that time, because I figured, okay, we'll get a little bit closer.
Yeah.
And then when I go, we'll find, so I didn't expect them to be able to go right to it, right? So,
yeah, right.
what I had actually, we'd actually sort of lined up. Okay, if this is the area, here's where you'll be able to search for a day or two. Like we'll be able to cover this much ground, right? So we didn't really expect to be able to go right to the spot. So yeah, so those guys, they knew of wreckage there. They said, exactly matching Forrest's story, that the plane must have hit the cliff and there's wreckage like sort of spread out.
Because it exploded, right? It's in Thrill of the Chase. It exploded, yeah.
Right, it exploded. So there were once big pieces there, but those were hauled away as scrap. Even though this is a pretty remote area and it's a pretty tough climb, the amount that you can get for the scrap metal is a good amount of money there.
Right.
So a bunch of guys from Vietnam came in and they went up and took just within the past 5 years, just purely for scrap, which they sell to China basically.
Sat there for 40 years and then somebody came and took a bunch of it. Wow.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so can we take a pause for a second? Because I have a whole bunch of questions from the chat. So maybe we'll answer for a minute or two.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then we'll go to like the next chapter of this book. So how was this project funded?
How was it funded?
You don't have to answer anything you don't want to, but there's lots of questions. I know you won't answer some of them.
I'm assuming you had to pay these people over there to do this for you, right?
Yes, So it's I funded it. It is not. I've funded a few video projects. In comparison, this is not that expensive.
Okay.
So, and it, was sort of my crazy idea. So I wanted to, obviously.
That's awesome, man.
I wanted to be assuming all the risk, and and it's something that, as much as it means to Forrest, and I love hearing that. It was a huge, exciting adventure for me. And in fact, like when I talk to people and I mention this, it's like the one thing where, because people who know me, like I say, oh, this great thing happened at work, and they're like, yeah, we know about you. When I say, oh,
you're one of those,
right? I sent this team to Vietnam, but that's like the story that gets everybody, because no one's ever heard something like that.
Well,
So
that you actually found it. That is literally a needle in a haystack, and that you actually were able to find it is something else.
Okay, so the waterfall and gravestone, My War for Me.
Oh yeah.
At this point, are you doing what we all do, and you're tying everything to the chase? And now this is going to break it loose for you from a solve standpoint. Did you see any ties to the chase at this point, or your search location theories, or are you just focused on Vietnam?
And are you a searcher at this point? Are you actually still trying to figure out the poem, or was it just about the plane recovery and that's kind of it?
So from about January until I finished writing the story for Dale's site, I didn't, which I think was October or late September, I barely touched the actual treasure hunt.
Okay.
I was focused on this, and I have X number of hours of free time. I have a couple of kids, I have a job. There's only some hours here and there. So, and luckily, like this thing, the time difference is such that this is like a lot of this stuff is late at night.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out really well in that sense. But I didn't. None of this ties into finding the treasure in any way.
Okay.
Although I do feel that the rescue that Forrest tells in the book, his story, like that's sort of self-contained in the book, is important, but this additional stuff is not. Clearly he's not going to make you have to find his airplane.
Right.
Yeah, the end of this is not you have the treasure chest because they sent it to you from.
Right.
Yeah.
So written on his airplane was the coordinates. No,
WWH equals.
Said HOB on the little piece of aluminum. He carved it while he was over there.
Okay, just a couple more, and then we'll continue with the questions.
Sure.
Someone did ask if you would reveal the exact coordinates of where you found the plane.
Oh, so I'm a little hesitant to do that because the villagers were very kind and everything. But I don't know if they had this request or just our guys just trying to be very respectful.
Yeah.
They asked me not to give the exact coordinates because they didn't want. I don't know if people would do this, but they didn't want like tourists
Sightseers,
coming,
yeah, sightseers, you know, yeah.
sightseers
Yeah.
saying, "I want to see Forest Plain. Show me," you know.
Right.
So they asked, you know, the guys I had hired had said, you know, don't say anything about exactly where it is. You know, I mean, you know the town, but you know,
Yeah.
nobody knows the exact. And again, they
Yeah.
also don't want people trying to bypass the village and go up,
Yeah,
you know,
and get hurt,
and
and exactly, as
Yeah.
we've seen,
And
people
this
go a
is
little
I mean,
crazy.
just to sort of give you, I mean, this is very. There's a lot of dangers involved in this, and this is really why you also need to have people who have done this before and know how to navigate through the jungle and stuff like that. There is a lot of unexploded ordnance
Oh,
in
gotcha.
Laos.
Yeah, I bet.
In fact, I had pulled all the numbers for that article. I mean, it's like something like a third of everything they dropped never exploded, which was like 300 million bombs. So there's like 100 million bombs or something like that haven't gone off.
Wow.
And they do go off, and you know, people get hurt. It happens to this day. So it's dangerous. So you have to sort of know the signs of seeing those type of things, and you have to have researched, you know, where bombs were dropped, which they, you know, they kind of have a sense of from mission reports. They've compiled that information. So, you know, it's definitely a dangerous. There are a lot of dangers involved in going into the jungle out there. You just can't go out there and do it. There's also tigers, and they're poisonous centipedes.
I was gonna say,
And-
plus it's a jungle, everybody.
It's a
You
jungle.
know,
Yeah.
Well,
So-
and internationally traveling right now might be a little difficult.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, now you can't. Yeah, now you.
Yeah.
Now you-
And somebody asked that because of the virus. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so I think I know the answer to this one, but why was it not found of the exact time when he was rescued? Of like when he
Because-
came down, it's because he parachuted, right?
Right. So he ejected. The plane flew. Now we know exactly where it was. It flew another 3 miles, and there's no reason for them to go and try to find the air. I mean, that place, as it turned out, the village chief told us, hey, you know, there were Vietnam bases all throughout that area, Vietnamese bases all throughout
Yeah.
that area. So, you know, Forrest said he heard dogs. Well, he heard dogs. I mean,
Right.
it was close. And had anyone gone into there, I mean, it probably would have taken fire. So, yeah, no, there was just no reason for them to retrieve it.
Okay, so we're at the point that the drone, the footage is going back and forth between you and Forrest. Other people are emailing him, and this is the reason he's saying, "Guys, stop emailing me." He's trying to get to your email. And
Was
he's
that
reading
about
all
that
these
time?
others.
I wonder if that's actually interesting. You know, like I got important emails that are coming in. Everybody.
Yeah, some important
Yeah.
people. So now you're at the point of you haven't found anything yet, though, right?
Right. So they go back that night. Basically, they tell us, okay, there's wreckage in this area. We can get you there. They use that right in that area is like a little bit of a cave, and it's funny because it almost reminds me of the Mummy Joe cave
Right.
from the third book, because it's like
Yeah.
just sort of like a almost like a rectangular sort of, it almost looks like it's carved into the cliff. When they hunt out in that area, which when hunting gets sort of sparse, they go out to that area and they sleep in that cave. That's where they sort of take
Oh wow.
shelter.
Okay.
So that's really close to where the wreckage is. So
Okay.
they know that area pretty well.
And somebody
the
asked
next
about
day-
the box, but you said the box was gone. That box was gone instantaneously, right?
What
The
box?
cockpit box. I
Was
don't
there a
know.
black box
like-
on a fighter? I don't know. I don't know
Yeah,
that.
I'm not sure that there is. I don't know if there is or there isn't a black
Okay.
box, but
Okay.
the they did say that they believe that the cockpit was removed back in maybe around in 68 or shortly after,
Okay.
because there's intelligence value to the Vietnamese, and I mean they probably handed
right.
it to the Russians actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was, they believe that was taken really early. And then they had seen an engine part there for years and years, and then they even thought it was still there, or some of them thought it was still there, and when they went, it wasn't there. They said, oh, actually, this is about 5 years ago. They had this was taken out.
Oh, you're like, oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Man, that would
Now,
have been huge. Okay.
people have asked, and I don't even know how this would be possible, but in the My War for Me story, he talks about the waterfall. This is not part of when he parachuted, but he talks about the
Right.
waterfall he visited and the grave marker that he tripped over. Any plans to try and find that waterfall or anything?
Right. So I actually talked to Forrest about that, and he had heard, and this makes complete sense, but he had heard that the French government repatriated all those remains years ago.
Oh,
20, 30, 40, I don't know, years and years ago. So, which makes total sense. Why would they leave them there? Especially after, like, they were no longer enemies, right? Because the
So-
French and the Vietnamese had, obviously there was a war between them, right? So, so there wouldn't be, I don't know, could we find the waterfall, but if there's, probably, but if there's no gravestones anymore, I don't know.
Yeah.
If we'd even know 100% certainty that was even the waterfall, right? So
no, I know a lot of searchers think maybe that's a made-up story and it's a hint to the treasure or something, but what you're saying is there were actually bodies where Forrest was. It was a type of graveyard, correct?
well,
Is what we're thinking?
I mean, I've never seen it, but what he said makes 100% sense. Like,
Okay.
that would make sense that they would remove it. So,
Okay.
I mean, I can't tell you one way or another. We didn't go there, but I would say, yeah, there were graves there, and then
Yeah.
those remains were repatriated years ago.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
finding the waterfall would sort of not, there'd be nothing interesting would come of it, basically.
Right.
And we wouldn't know for sure that was even it. It's not like I have coordinates in a mission
Yeah.
report.
Yeah, right.
Right,
Of where that was, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then, so how did it go when you finally told Forrest, hey, did you give it to him in person or did you have to mail it to him, the actual piece?
So I had it shipped to me first.
Okay.
So I
You're
did a
still
lot of.
like, I don't want to put this man through it. Is that why?
No. So we didn't know. Okay, I did a lot of research on all the laws around shipping stuff from Vietnam, from Laos, and what if it was from Vietnam or whatever. So
Okay.
the only laws that I found, and I've asked some other people to look into it, what involve antiques and like old shipwrecks from like hundreds of years ago. So there's no issue as far as we could tell. And when we shipped it, we were kicking around all these ideas. Do we hide it I said, no, let's just put it exactly what it is. If they stop it, they stop it.
Oh, okay.
If we hide something, then it's like we're admitting we're doing something wrong. So it seemed like, right.
Right.
So, I just said, just ship it. We'll say exactly what it is. And if it makes it, it makes it. But also one possibility is it could make it to our side and get stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would
How
go
long
and
did it
retrieve
take?
it.
How long did it take from like
Not long.
place
Oh,
to
okay.
place?
Actually, we said like DHL. I mean, it's not heavy. So, and it went in an
Okay.
envelope.
Like
Oh,
a week,
okay.
a month?
Less than a week, I think.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Because you're on the fast track. Because we're talking. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Because-
No. It was pretty quick, and then it made it. So if it had gotten stuck in customs here, I didn't want Forrest to have to go figure out how to get out of the customs. So I figured
Right.
I'll send it to me. Then if it gets stuck, I can go get it out and then send it to him.
'Cause
But it made it through, no issues. They looked at it, like when they brought it to DHL, they looked at it. They said no problem. So
Oh,
far
that's
as
good.
I
It's
know,
not like
there's-
scrap metal. It's like a little.
yeah,
But-
it's a little piece. Yeah, exactly.
But if you want to be
exactly.
technical, the military, the government owns that piece. I mean, the plane is you know what I mean. But it's 50 years
Yeah, I know what
ago,
you
and yeah. So, okay, so you get it. You have verified now that it was from Forrest Plane in some way, and not
Yeah,
from a different
so-
wreckage.
Right. So there's a lot of things that tell us that. One is, basically, we, from that vantage point, we know that this whole thing had fit Forrest's description of where this
Mhm.
happened. From the crash site, I was able to look up all of the planes that were lost within 30 miles, right? And the way I could do this is National Archives has a whole bunch of these electronic records with the coordinates, the last known coordinates of planes that were lost. So
Were
I
there a
basically
lot
took
of them
that.
in that area?
So within 30 miles is about 200
Oh, wow.
aircraft,
Okay.
and 4 of them were F-100s.
Gotcha.
So right off the bat, if you find an F-100,
1 in
there's only
4.
yeah,
Right.
there's only a 2% chance you're going to find one, right? So
Okay.
in fact, the thing I was worried most about was we were going to find an F-4 because there are far more F-4s that were lost than F-100. So anyway, so I had putting all this together. So we knew, okay, we find an F-100, we're in really good shape. And then I even took the other extra step. I said, well, okay, what are the other 3? And it turns out the next closest one is about 15 miles away, and they weren't exactly sure of where the wreckage was, but they found it in like the 80s or 90s. It was very close to where they believed it was. So that's 15 miles away. It's definitely not this. And the other 2 are about 25 miles away. And in those cases, the pilots had ejected just before the plane sort of fell apart, right?
Okay.
So the wreckage from those are nowhere near here. And the angles, I mean, this hit a cliff from a certain side. These other guys would have been in the wrong angle, would have been all the wrong angles to have hit it. Forrest was going in the exact right direction. These other guys, where they would have ejected, it's not even possible. So again, if it was an F-100, we know right away that we got it, right? So when they went, they found parts. They sort of scavenged in the dirt and excavated a bit, and started pulling parts. They found the first big hit we got were the tire fragments, and the tire fragments still have the spec on the tire. So it's like a size and a thickness, a ply rating. So it took that, I looked that up, and it turns out it's only on 2 or 3 aircraft, but the only one that was ever used in Laos was the F-100. So right away we knew we got it.
Nice.
But I took that. I also sent that to crew chiefs. They all said, yeah, that's the only plane it would have been as the F-100. We have other parts with serial numbers on them. Those all came from the F-100. So we found we got multiple hits on that. And I wanted to make sure I researched every piece that had a serial number because I didn't want to see something that was wrong. Right. So it took my time to do all that, and yeah, we nailed it. So.
Okay, so now how are you getting it to Forrest? Have you told that? I don't think you've told that part tonight.
Oh, so I overnighted it to him. Actually, I overnighted it to him because I didn't want to hold on to it for long. In fact, I think I had it and I weighed it, and I did the old water displacement to find the volume, and to figure out the density of the metal to confirm, it's aluminum. So I just wanted to, that's the only check I could really do quickly. So that's the one thing I did. And then I sent it to Forrest, and then he got it the next day. It was, I got a nice email from him when he got it. And then a few weeks later, or maybe it was a month later, I was going out to California. So on the way back, we stopped off at Santa Fe and visited Forrest, and we got to see him with it. It was really cool.
Oh, that's cool. Now
somebody asked, just because they're searchers, did Forrest tell you specifically not to look at the waterfall or around the waterfall, thinking maybe the chest was there? I don't know why they asked that. Oh. Did you discuss the waterfall?
No. Well, I had asked him. Well, like I said earlier, I'd asked him, like, what would you think about? Would you think it'd be interesting to go to try to get footage at the waterfall? And that's basically when he said that the French government had repatriated the remains. So he didn't tell me no, don't go there or something like that. He just said, there's not going to be anything there. If you think you're going to get a picture of, the I forget the inscription on the headstone, but
they've been putting it in the chat. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, people. Yeah. Okay.
Now, Captain Marvel says, if you know, Christopher, is that the same plane that's pictured on page 77 of the book? That's the picture with Forrest and the fighter. Is that the actual plane?
No. So the there's a number of planes that they use, and you're not often in. you may be in the same plane every so often, but if you look at all the different, well, obviously the other time he was shot down, he wouldn't be in that plane again. But,
right.
but you do have, there would be different planes over time, but that one in that photo, I'll have to look at it. I'm not. Is there a serial number on it?
I would have to look
remember.
at it as well.
Hold on. I have it
You got
right
the
here.
book? Yeah. And while she's looking that up, any plans to go back and look for anything else, or?
So there is a.
Uh-oh. wait, hang on. Breaking news. All right.
So we never got to go to the place where Forrest was rescued. And in the beginning of March, the first or second week, they're going to go back out and try to find some of the stuff that was left behind there, which, by some miracle, if we find a camera,
yeah,
and by some miracle,
wow.
there's viable film in there. I mean, that would be really exciting. But we may find he also had 50 pounds of survival equipment. That's probably all in little plastic baggies and things like that.
He left
That's
behind?
probably still there. Yeah,
wow.
they left behind.
So just in the next 2 or 3 weeks, they may try and go look for this?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow. That's awesome.
Last I heard from them was a couple days ago. This virus situation is, there's a lot happening right now. So far, this area specifically is not affected, but Vietnam and Laos, they are affected. So I don't know what could happen over the next, couple of weeks. But hopefully, we're still early enough before things get too bad that they could sort of slip out there and, check it out and at least we'll get.
There is no serial number, but there is a bumper sticker thing.
I live and
there
love
you
it.
go.
Oh, that's cool. Lucky me.
That would be cool.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No, there's no serial number that I can see. Not that I. Yeah, I haven't.
And what we're going to show before we close for tonight is we got about 9 minutes or so of Forrest talking about you and looking for the plane. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so when we ask Forrest something like, what's kind of your most prized possession? And he starts with, okay, so I know this guy named Christopher. That's a pretty cool thing. With as much as he's had happen in his life and he meets so many searchers, he wanted this story to come out and have a discussion about it. So that's pretty impressive and you say luck. I think it was definitely luck, but there was a lot of skill involved it sounds like you were pretty persistent of just,
yeah,
you just didn't call your first guy and it's oh, you're in Laos doing National Geographic,
right.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a couple of, more than one phone call and then back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I was getting discouraged because it seemed like to handle that whole side of it would have been daunting because without speaking the language, it's just difficult, right? So when I found this guy, basically he's an American. I think he's an expat. I think he now is a citizen of Laos. Or during that time, he had moved to Vietnam actually. So I'm not sure what his citizenship is, but he lives out there. His wife is Laotian. Or Laotian, and so he speaks some of the language, she speaks the language obviously, and it sort of it was just great to have him as a resource because it would be so hard to find the right people, and this guy Kai who works for him, he's from Laos. He actually he does a lot of these motorcycle tours for him. He is amazing. He learned English by listening to the BBC. Actually.
Oh wow, okay.
And he's a cow farmer in the off season. And then
speaking of that, we did have a question from the room of when Forrest takes off his watch and he throws it. Someone wants to know if you can go and find the watch. He's never gonna wear a watch.
Can you look for every little detail in the thrill of the chase, including the treasure chest? Yeah.
No, if anyone could find it, I think we found it.
That's funny. What a story.
Has this helped you either gain clarity in a separate sort of way? Does this help you with the chase, getting to the chest at all? Or was it a fun little side project? Or maybe did it get you to know Forrest a little bit more and that helps? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think getting to know Forrest probably helps in maybe you would know a little bit more how he thinks. I can't say I specifically, I could put my finger on something that about that would help, but I mean, I think that's helpful. I mean, I think what I found really helpful in terms of the treasure hunt that's not exactly the material for it was like his San Lazaro book. I always thought that was maybe the most useful piece that's not really directly related, because he put so much time and effort, and when I read that, it almost comes off as like a PhD thesis. It's ties so much stuff together, and I mean, when he lays out all these hundreds of pieces for a photo, if you look through the photos in there, I mean, just imagine how complicated this whole thing could be. And when I read that, I was like, oh, this might not be like 9 easy steps to find $1 million treasure. It might be more like 900 steps, or more complicated. And I mean, obviously it's gone on for so long, so probably more of that than nine things to do, right?
But at one point you could have totally been taken back. Like if you would have tried to hide it in something and then customs found it, and then it's all, I mean, everything's gone. So you had a lot more barriers than this simple little treasure hunt we're a part of. It's just amazing. I mean, I love the story. So
I have a very important question for you. You ready?
Sure.
So you have a PhD, correct?
Yes.
Did Forrest ever make the comment to you that he was surprised a PhD needed a crutch?
Needed a crutch?
A crutch, yeah. No?
I don't know if I heard that one.
Only K-Pro. Okay, just a little inside joke, that's all. Sorry, K-Pro. I got to needle you sometimes.
thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I'm sure I've gotten some,
Did you get needled at all about your PhD?
I'm sure I have. Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, by Forrest.
Yeah, no. I'm sure I have. I can't remember specifically.
Thank you. That means he likes you. That means he likes me. We are the PhDs that he loves and adores, and Michael Hull as well.
There's no needling, because you're like, hey, I found your plane, remember? You know what I mean? There's no way he can do any of that with you. So,
well, yeah. I grew up in Brooklyn, and the way we made friends was, sort of busting chops, right?
Exactly.
So if you don't do that, I don't know, it feels like you're not that close, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep going to the next subject, my friend.
Shadowcaster says that was awesome. LOL. All right, everybody, I want you to thumbs up the video for having Christopher on. Christopher, thank you. We're not done, but I just want to take time out to say thank you for coming on and sharing the story.
Thanks for having me.
It was really
and
awesome.
telling your story, and it's been so, other than giving out coordinates, you really answered every single thing, and it's pretty amazing. And I mean, you just have to know that Forrest was so excited at that time getting that. Like he said, it came full circle.
Right. And the interview that we're going to show, somebody in the chat, I'd have to scroll up, see who it was, but basically said you're forever linked to the chase now. So when the treasure chest is found, you're part of the story. Like that plane, finding the plane is part of the story. So I thought that was
hopefully I won't be in it. So
yeah.
Well, so if you're not the one to find it, if you were to say, what's that one item, even though we don't know one of them, that one item, like for me, it's the frog. Is there something that you're like, I would really like really could?
From the treasure
from the treasure chest, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the I don't know if I have any sentimental attachment to it, but like the big nuggets are like sort of the
placer
right.
nugget.
I mean, that's
big as a hen's egg. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the prize piece in there is at least from a when you like I think Doug Preston talked about holding it.
I believe so.
The intro. One of the book, yeah. So I mean, like reading that too. I mean, I understand without actually having held it. I mean, I could see how, sort of gets the blood pumping.
Right.
I don't know how much that one thing is worth. I'd probably tens of thousands.
Gold prices are going up. Everybody, it broke $1,650 because of this whole virus crazy end of the world stuff. But
so it might go to 10 million, and Forrest will go get it.
And that's right. He's probably going to ask you to go get it for him. Would be my guess with your drone.
I have a little favor for you to.
Yeah.
It's all right, Forrest. I'll do it for you.
Right.
And amazing, all the nuggets were gone. Everything else was there.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, they do deteriorate. Sorry.
Yeah. Right.
There's like one little flake left, and all the big, you're like in your pockets, and there's.
So
Or was like the Goonies when he has it all in his mouth. And he's like spitting it out.
Oh, that's terrible.
So I did see that you do have a YouTube channel that has a couple videos on there. Can I give that out or?
Sure, yeah, and those are linked to the story on Dale's site.
Gotcha.
I think I don't know what I have on there, but I think
Like
it's just
3.
the videos related.
Yeah.
Just related. I only put that up just to add to the story when we published the story, because
Gotcha.
we had a bunch of video, and I wanted people to be able to see this stuff actually happening and them going into the jungles, and those environments are so cool. Like even just a video, like when we were doing this, it was like, well, just having the video, I think, for me is satisfying. So we're not going to come away with nothing.
Right.
So I wanted to put that out there so other people can sort of take a look and see like how hard the hike was to the plane. There's a lot of video of that actually, and it was certainly a difficult hike. And
Well, I don't
bet.
know if this is serious or not, but Robert Henning says, I'm proud of my son-in-law, Chris.
Uh-oh.
Just saying.
Yeah,
There's
that-
lots of people that are into this.
never heard of him. No,
Oh,
that's my
yeah. Never heard of him. Ban him
Hi, Dad.
immediately. That's funny. But on YouTube is your name, Christopher Lafrida. So everybody, if you go on YouTube and put in Christopher Lafrida, you can see how it's spelled right there. You'll see the couple videos that are up. It's also on Dale's blog. You guys could put in Christopher Lafrida, because I did, and the story comes up. And it's just a great, awesome thing that you just had the balls to say, I'm going to go find it. You know what I mean? I'm going to look. I'm going to try. And then that you actually found it. I mean, that's awesome.
It's kind of funny. I was so certain that we would fail that I never even told my wife about it until after we found it. She had no clue.
Is that right?
So I was sort of doing this in secret because I was certain we would fail. I was like, this is ridiculous. We're not
It's a
gonna
long
find it.
shot. It's the longest.
It's a long shot. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I say it's definitely, you could do everything right and you still wouldn't find it, right? Because it just might not be there.
I mean,
yeah.
Somebody posted in the chat that there's over 10,000 planes that it went down during Vietnam. Now, any plans to find maybe a different, other than Forrest, but any plans to look for anything else Vietnam related?
Yeah, so I would definitely be interested in doing that, and I've researched a few, and it just wasn't didn't seem well. Some of them had already been found. Anything that has remains, I mean, they've done everything they could to find them, and they're still finding things like that.
Right.
So that would be sort of off the table. We wouldn't want to go anywhere near something like that.
Right.
Unless somebody said, hey, they've tried, they never found it. This is my relative. And I would be like, okay, yeah, absolutely. We could try to find it.
And especially if somebody was still alive, if the pilot was still alive, like Forrest is, that could help you, this is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So if it's someone who who ejected from the plane and said, hey, I would totally be in for that. I mean, I've built up quite a bit of knowledge to do this, and I would want to use it any way I could. But if something came along, but it's sort of hard to find this exact case where you have enough information to find it, and yet it hadn't already been found. So.
Well, some people were questioning how on earth could your wife not know, but just in case you were questioning that, someone named Amy Lafrida has said it is a true story. So we have one here tonight, my friends.
Welcome, Amy, and welcome the father-in-law.
I don't know if Amy is related at all, but it's Tina.
Yeah, that's my wife.
That's great.
We have it. There you have it. We've had dad-in-law and wife. And of course, the scrapbook's up there. What an awesome story! So much fun.
Now, was your family able to meet Forrest as well, or was it just you?
So I was with. We're actually visiting my in-laws with my wife and my kids, and we were out on the West Coast, and he said, hey, why don't you stop by on your way back?
Oh.
It sort of all worked out. So we all went to Santa Fe, and it was fun, but a little nerve-wracking when my son is throwing giant stones at forest ducks as they swim through his pond.
That's pretty funny.
And in fact, I haven't told this to Forrest, but we went to the gallery the next day, Matucci Galleries, I think it is now. So
Yeah, the old Forrest Fenn
super
Gallery.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had brought my kids there, and it was great. I mean, and they were great. The people were wonderful. Like we were like trying to like bottle up our kids because there's so much expensive artwork there. But they were great. They were like, "Oh, why don't you come into by the pond, let them play, blah blah." We did, and I didn't say we were visiting Forrest at all. They were super nice to us in case we had to escape, make a getaway. I didn't want them to know how to track me down.
It's probably they probably still don't have the rule. Please touch, be responsible. I think that ended with Forrest when he shut his gallery.
I might have changed that after we left.
Yeah.
But again, like I'm in and I'm looking at some of the artwork. It was nice, and there's some smaller pieces. I was like, maybe might think about something. And then I hear again a giant stone get thrown into the pond because it's very similar to at Forest. So I was like, it's time to get out of here.
Right.
Before you see everything crash in the den or something. Yeah.
Oh man. They had a blast in Santa Fe though. I mean, I really the first time I had ever been there was visiting Forest. The first time then with my family, and it's really a great place for family and kids. They had such a great time, and my daughter must have stopped every person with a dog, and there's so many dogs there to like pet their dog. Super nice, super great. Everyone was friendly. We really had a great time. And of course, with Forrest, it was, we had a lot of fun. My son tried to ring that bell from Eric Sloan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the one in his den, yeah.
Yeah.
Or the one outside.
Or the one outside.
Oh, the one outside,
On
yeah.
the old
You have a picture next to that,
pole.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was going for it to ring, and I was like, oh, no.
Right.
That's too funny. Okay, well, we have a couple, unless anybody has any last minute questions, put them in now because we have a couple of announcements. And then we are going to show about a 9-minute clip. A lot of you are like, you clipped some things and it's because they're super secret hints. Nope, we're going to show it. It's in this story in its entirety. You've heard Chris's version, then you will hear Forrest's version, and they actually link, and we have family verification. And so a couple of announcements. One, we are having a marathon on March 28th. Chris, have you seen our marathons?
No, I haven't seen marathon.
Okay, we basically do, well, we say 12 hours, but we went 14 and a half hours of Forrest Fenn live discussion.
Yeah.
If you would like to come on, we had 16 people on last time. I already have about 8 people brand new that have never been on. That's who we're giving priority.
Like 30-minute segment, not the whole day, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and we're going to start a little earlier, so I don't have to stay up till 4 a.m. Mike's on West Coast time. I'm on East Coast time.
Right.
So if you're interested, kpro3@aol.com. Send me a quick email. Say if you're interested. That's all I'm trying to do now is kind of compile. If you have ideas for Clash of the Titans, I have a couple Titans interested. I'm coming up with some stories or some topics, so that will be fun.
And when's the date for the next marathon?
March 28th,
Saturday. March 28th.
I think we're going to start at either 9 or 10 a.m. Mike's time. We'll go to 9 to 10 p.m. That still makes it 1 a.m. my time. But
then there's the after party.
And there's the after party, which is fun. We bring everyone back. There'll be lots and lots of people.
So, Chris, any plans to go into Femboree? Do you know what Femboree is? The annual gathering of searchers in New Mexico?
Yeah, I know what Femboree is. I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
I haven't been to one, but maybe I'll see.
Well, next January, there's this little poker tournament we do in Vegas, which is also for searchers. So I'll reach out to you when we have the details on that, see if you can make it.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, and I will break from our announcements when because now I see my name a lot, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
How far from the guns Forrest marked to the plane, Chris?
It's about 25 miles. Okay, so about 20 miles to where he ejected, and another 3 miles to the plane.
Okay. And then Paul wants to know, what state do you think it's in? Do you have a state narrowed down yet?
And you're in New Jersey, right? So it's not like you're close to any of them. You know, you're not biased, is what I'm trying to say, because you live in one of them.
Well, I mean, I don't. So where the actual treasure is, where you start. What if you start in one state and end up in another state?
I think borders is a subtle hint. Borderline biddies. That's possible.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I think Montana and Wyoming are very important, but I don't. Until I know exactly where it is, I don't know where it is. Basically, could be anywhere.
Nice.
So you're open to wherever the clues
I'm
lead.
open.
You have narrowed it to 4 states, though, right?
Yeah.
Some people have not. I will tell you.
I would say I I'm not excluding it. I think it's in one of those 4 states. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's in one of those 4 states. But if it wasn't, and those 4 states are only there to help you solve the poem, but it's somewhere else, I wouldn't think that that's out of bounds. So.
Now, have you ever been to Yellowstone? I know you don't have a boots on the ground, but have you ever just been on vacation to Yellowstone?
No, and
Okay.
that's I'm that's one of the trips. So, my kids are still a little bit young, so I want to take them, and I want to go. I want to do it with them. Like for the first time I see it, I want to be with them. So, it's one of the trips we're planning, maybe in a year or 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so my little guy, I guess he's not little anymore. He's 10, but I remember when I started this, and I think he was 6 or 7, and I'm like, he would just go jump in a geyser because like the geysers are so clear and they look beautiful, and people do that.
Walk
and
right up
dogs
to
do
it.
that, and yeah, like so I'm like, I need to get to the point where when I say freeze, he knows like freeze because there's danger, rather than oh this is so cool. And I'm an over worrier though, so maybe that's just
me and Christy made
there were plenty of kids there. So.
Christy and I made the trip to Yellowstone last summer. We did a searcher meetup, and we didn't have our kids or anything, but yeah, it was interesting to go to the park. If you get a chance, definitely do it.
Yeah, it's awesome. We wanted to say thank you. Those of you that know Tony Henman, he won World Series of Fenn.
The poker tournament.
He is somebody that always continues to give back. Here is what he just sent me, and I'll know what the stone is later.
Nice.
But here is what he sent D-Pro, and I'm going to make D-Pro because here's something that is interesting. He sent him one of these guys.
1986 silver dollar?
Silver shirt, Liberty dollar.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, and here is what my son came home and said to me today. He said, here's a riddle. He goes, what is wet but not in water? And he's 10. And I went, who asked you that? And he's like, it's an assignment at school. We're doing riddles. And I'm like, what's the answer?
And he said, I didn't know a PhD needed a crutch. Oh.
Okay, enough, mister.
All right, sorry.
Okay, so I will say D-Pro he's going to get this, and he actually has another present. Thank you, Jim. But I want him to actually present that to you because that might be why we have this conundrum of the treasure chest is not in water, but it is wet, and it's just a funny little riddle.
Wait,
so,
what's the answer? You're not going to tell us?
You need to watch D-Pro, mister.
Oh, okay. You'll do a video with him. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you to Tony because he sent me one also, 1986
Yes.
silver dollar.
Tony.
And he sent 2 other ones. These are 2020 for the boys, for my 2 boys, Chris and Eric. So thank you so much, Tony. That's very nice. Very nice thank you that he sent us.
Yes. Mike, you wanted to talk about a postcard?
Yeah, I got a ominous postcard in the mail, and I'm not going to show the other side because there is something written that is related to the Thrill of the Chase. There is you could call it a screen name on here, but I usually don't share things unless somebody tells me it's okay to share it in a vlog. So for the person who sent me this, and I just picked it up today, if you email me and tell me it's okay to share it, then I will. But thank you for the postcard, and it makes me think what you wrote on there. But yeah, let me know if I can share that in a future vlog. Yeah.
Super secret hits.
Right.
Okay. And then the 2 last things, the Vegas hunt. There's a Vegas hunt starting tomorrow.
Yeah. There's a treasure hunt here in Las Vegas. So, Christopher, we talk primarily about the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt, but we also talk about other treasure hunts. You guys all remember the treasure hunting amusement park where we look at different treasure hunts as different rides in an amusement park. And Forrest Fenn's is the big roller coaster that everybody wants to ride. But there's other rides out there, and one of them is in Las Vegas. It starts tomorrow at 5 p.m. They were just on the news out here. It's a brand new company. This is their first city. They go to different cities and do treasure hunts. They've said the prize pool is up to $2,000. So I paid. It's $25. Now it's $30. I got an early bird thing, I think. So anybody here in Vegas, if you have paid and you're going to play, I've reached out, like JBR Princess is playing. Dominate may play. I reach out to him, but anybody here in Vegas, let me know. Maybe if it's totally hard, we could collaborate and try and find whatever it is they're going to hide this weekend. And I may go live letting you guys know where I'm at, what I'm looking for. So something fun for this weekend.
Okay. And then you wanted to show the illustration.
Yeah. Before we get to the illustration, I do want to say trickytreasures.com, everybody. That's a new website. You can earn money by solving riddles. It's a new website game based on riddles. You need to figure out what the answer is to the riddles on the playing board as they are released. A new riddle is revealed when a certain number of new players join the game. So the more you speed share Tricky Treasures, the faster the game will move on. It only costs $10 to play, and one person is going to win $5,000. So that's trickytreasures.com. Check that out. You guys know Nelica, especially if you were at the World Series of Fenn. You know Nelica.
Or the Jamie drawing.
Or the Jamie
World
drawing.
Series of Fenn
Yeah.
last year. She's a mover and shaker. She's great in the chase.
And you guys know that she has some of the original illustrations from Forrest Fenn's books. This is one she put on eBay. This is from Too Far to Walk, The Bullet. Original illustration from the book. It's currently at $300, and it's actually going to end Monday while we're live. So Monday night is when it ends, and we just wanted to put the word out there for Nelica that it's out there. If anybody wants to collect something like this, there you go. It's available on eBay. Okay,
and last announcement, yes, Nelica and Morrow.
And Morrow, of course.
Yes. And
Thanks,
so if you have a topic idea for next week, please put it in the comment section below. If there's something that you really pressing, Mike and I have lots of ideas, but we kind of want to do what you guys want to see, because things like Chris being here, we're over 300 people sitting and waiting at our every word, because not because of us, but because of Chris. So if there is some different ideas that you have, there is a new interview that I'm doing right now, and I'm hoping that some of it can be kind of put on the cutting room floor for all of you to see, outside of Forrest and Douglas. So there's some things happening in the documentary. Some of you have asked me about the documentary. There's 2 interviews that are left right now, looking to do that through the end of March. Then everything's going to be cut March, April, May-ish timeframe. And then there's going to be some trailers developed and then a full documentary, but we are going to start pitching. It looks like there's both cable and Netflix, and some other like movie that might be interested, but we have a specific lead that's already kind of taken off a little bit. So we're going to try to get those trailers done sooner than later, and then just see where it goes. So we'll keep you up to date as we know, but in the comment section, please thumbs up if you liked Chris's story. How can you not? I know Forrest is watching, and I know he's watching for more than just a minute or two. He loved this story. And so thank you for being here, Chris. And I don't see any other questions. So we are going to go out with, you will see the full interview clip. So there's a couple of new things, but there's a couple of things that you have seen before, but you're going to see it uncut, kind of question, answer all the way through, but it is about 9 minutes. So unless there's, they're doing, never mind. They're doing the riddle that Depro, just wait for Depro.
Yeah, now they want to, I'd say, AJ, where are you? Yeah. Christopher, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, is there any kind of a contact email? But it's only if you want to give it out. You know, it's up to you.
Yeah, so I just created one, lastplacesearcher@gmail.
Lastplacesearcher@gmail.com, everybody.
And then just hit cckpro3@aol.com, and all good. I wouldn't object to that. No,
please come back on and update us. You said possibly they could go look for the other location. So come back on. Let us know in a couple months.
We'll do that. I think it's going to happen. Like I said, I heard from them a couple days ago, and they seem very positive. So hopefully it'll happen, and hopefully we find something cool.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you for coming on. Awesome story. Awesome that you found it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody, to hit thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thank you for the super chats, to those who did it. And you want to say bye, K-Pro, before we show the Forrest Fenn clip?
Bye, K-Pro.
Let me make sure I have the right clip. Give me 1 second. Yeah, that looks like
you play the wrong clip. You're in trouble, mister.
All right, everybody, here we go.
Did you ever anticipate every word that you would say or anything you would do would be taken as a clue or a hint for your treasure chest?
That's one of the things I did. I mean, that's preposterous, really. But I know that that's happened. And there's a guy by the name of Chris Frieda. You know that name? He has a PhD in electrical engineering, and he designs and makes microchips for a living. I mean, this guy's no dummy. He's a treasure hunter. Lives back east. And he figured that if he read my books and learned something about me, then he could find a clue that would take him to the treasure. So he called me on the phone. He told me some things that were interesting to me, so I invited him to come see me. And he wanted to see my Vietnam scrapbook. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff from Vietnam, photographs and different things. And 328 combat missions are written in great detail. I wrote them as soon as I landed. I mean, this is something that it's pretty elaborate. So he started going through those things, and he couldn't believe some of the things that were in there. And he got interested in the fact that I'd been shot down twice, and once in Vietnam and once in Laos. And I made the comment in my debriefing after having been shot down in Laos. I made the comment that I'd just come off a tanker and the airplane was full of fuel, and I ejected from the airplane, and I watched it crash into what we call a cliff or a bluff in this country. They call karst over there. And he got into that thing mathematically, and he figured that the airplane flew for 55 seconds after I ejected out of it. And he hired a couple of guys, an expatriate from Australia and some local Laotian natives, and they all got machetes, and there were a lot of tigers in that jungle, so they hired this guy with an AK-47 to go with them, and they hacked their way through the jungle. I mean, these gave me wonderful videos of them doing this. And they went to the spot where the airplane crashed, except it wasn't there. But they knew it had been there, so they started cutting the underbrush, the stuff that's a foot off, the weeds that are a foot off the ground. And then they start picking up pieces of my airplane. Aluminum tubing. They found a big piece of one of my tires, and he got the nomenclature off of that, and he researched, and he found out, because he wanted to make sure that was my airplane, my F-100. So he found out that tire, the nomenclature on that tire told him that only 2 different types of fighters in the Vietnam War used that tire, and the other airplane was an F-106, and we lost 6 F-106s, and he researched where every one of them crashed, and there was another F-100 that crashed about 2 miles from where my airplane was, so he did some research and eliminated that. And I mean, he wrote a lengthy story about that. And the closest village was 2 miles away, and 11 people lived in that village. Well, he hired he got permission from the chief of the village. I mean, he's chief of 11 people, and hired a couple of people out of that village to go with him, and they knew where the wreckage was. And the airplane was gone because he was told that the Chinese wanted the metal. They were buying all kinds of metal, and they took that airplane apart, I think, a screw at a time, and hauled it out of there. But a lot of the things they didn't want, and those things are still there. And he gave me a little cast aluminum piece of my airplane that laid in that jungle for 51 years, waiting for those guys to come get it. I mean, that's one of my prized possessions today. But
I was gonna say, how did that make you feel when you saw the piece and now you have it?
When I was filling my treasure chest up with things that I wanted it to be valuable, which means you have to put small things in there. And so I put several hundred, maybe 1,000 gold nuggets in there. There's some beautiful little jade pieces, and I'm trying to get to your question.
No, please. Yeah,
and,
you're fine.
But when everything was ready to go hide the treasure chest, I had kind of an empty feeling. I'm going to go hide this treasure chest, but it's not with me anymore. I mean, I'm not part of it, and I felt empty. And I started thinking about that, and then it came to me. I had this wonderful little bracelet that Richard Wetherell, when he climbed down into Mesa Verde the very first time, he discovered Mesa Verde. When he climbed down the very first time and entered Mesa Verde, the ruins, he picked up these 22 little turquoise beads. a year or so later, when he was excavating the ruin, Richard Weatherall had an Indian working for him in the excavation that made a little rope bracelet out of those 22 beads. Well, a lot of things happened. An Indian shot and killed Richard Weatherall. I mean, there's a myriad of events that took place after that. But then the bracelet was sold to Fred Harvey. The Harvey houses, you know, the Grand Canyon, he owns all those concessions. And then when he died, that collection was being acquisitioned into the Herd Museum in Phoenix. Well, it just so happened that Byron Harvey was a friend of mine. He was a relative of Fred Harvey's, and I was talking to him one day, and he showed me this bracelet. And I said, well, I'll play you a game of pool for that bracelet. This guy was certifiably crazy. I mean, you had to like the guy, but when I first went in his house in Phoenix, he had Maria Potts lined up, and he was rolling one like a bowling alley, breaking Maria Potts. I mean, he was known to jerk the phone off the wall in the Herd Museum because he got mad. But anyway, I won that bracelet in a pool game. So I told myself, you know, if I put that bracelet in this treasure chest, that's part of me. And that was the last thing I put in. I closed the lid and I said, yeah, that's okay. I'm part of the thing from now on. But then when Chris Lafrida sent me that little piece of my airplane, I got the same feeling, you know, I've been full circle. And now I could feel myself subconsciously relaxing a little bit, if that makes any sense. And yeah, it was closure for me. And all of a sudden, I'm in the back of my mind, I've always been sorry that I jumped out of that airplane, because it was a good airplane. 274 times it took me out in combat mission, and they brought me back, and now I'm gonna desert this guy that's done all these things for me for 12 months. And I think by gaining that little piece of cast aluminum, I think I really don't know what I'm talking about, but I can feel that it has affected me to the point where that little piece of metal now is one of my prized possessions. I mean, that may sound crazy to you, because it is crazy.